When working with HTML and CSS, understanding how things are laid out on the page has to do with something called the box model. The box model is the rules for laying things out on a page and sizing them. The box model starts with whatever your content is. This could be the text inside of a paragraph tag. This could be the input box. It could be any sort of content in HTML. Outside of that, there's a section called padding. This is the room around the content that the content wants to give it some space between it and the next level of content. Around the padding is a border, an optional border, but a border. So you could specify that a dotted line or a solid line could be around the content, and the padding is in between the border and that content. Then we also have a margin. So outside the border itself, there is room to space out the content. So padding and margin are similar, but they have to do with whether they're outside what is visibly shown in the element, so the border in the background, versus what is shown inside the element, so inside the border or shown inside the background. When we're displaying things on the page, we can specify properties for where it is physically on the page, where it is from the left, the right, the top, and the bottom. And the content itself can have properties for both height and for width. At runtime, you can also test for two more properties, actual width and actual height. It's important to understand that the actual width and height are the size of the element that includes the border and the padding, but not the margin, and has nothing to do with where it's located, top, left, right, or bottom. So this box model takes all of these individual pieces in consideration for how it's going to lay it out on a page. Let's take a look at some CSS and lay out our different elements so you can see how these end up playing a part with each other. Let's start with the headshot, and let's give it a border and a padding so we can really see the difference there. I'm going to give it a border, and the syntax for border, which we can see here, is what's called a multi-part syntax. This contains individual elements or individual properties that we can specify. 1 pixel solid red is going to give us a line of solid red around it. So for us, I'm going to say 1 pixel solid and then give it a color of 222, just like the other colors we're using here. And if we go and look at this on the web page, we can see now, it's a little hard to see probably in the video, but there is a small black line around it all. You can see it more around the bottom of the shirt. But I want there to be some space between the border and the picture. So here on the main one, I want to add that same sort of padding, but I'm just going to use a padding of 4 pixels. And I have a particular problem with main, and that is there's some extra space here before we get to the edge of the actual frame of the browser. And so one fix there is to actually set its margin to 0. I was purposeful in saying 0. It's a best practice if the value that you're dealing with anywhere in CSS is 0 to not specify the unit as well. 0 is 0. Doesn't matter whether it's inches, pixels, picas, or whatever. 0 is 0, and so that's how you're going to want to specify it. So now let's style that sidebar. One of the things about the sidebar is that we really want it to display itself on the left-hand side. And so I'm going to include a rule for sidebar that specifies what the background is, what the foreground color is. But this time I'm going to say position colored fixed. And fixed is important here because fixed tells it that we want it to be in a fixed position, that as we specify the left, the right, the top, or the bottom, it's going to be specifically drawn in the exact place in the browser that we want it to be. In fact, this is married with left equals 0. Left equals 0 says we want this to be on the left side of the page. And then we have a couple of others here that are important. Height and width. Height at 100% is another kind of unit you can use. Height being 100% is going to mean that that sidebar is going to take the entire vertical space of the page up to a width of 250 pixels to the left-hand side. An overflow is hidden means that anything that gets out of the section of the sidebar will be clipped instead of just displaying over. So with these in place, we should be able to see our sidebar now. Now, of course, one of the problems we have is the sidebar, because it's fixed, is being drawn on top of all of our other elements, and that's not good. Now, we could change each of these elements to push them out beyond where the sidebar is, but that's not really what we want to do. What we're going to do instead is take this div we had created that contains our main and our footer, and we're going to go ahead and give it a name. And I'm going to call it our wrapper. And for the wrapper, I'm going to set its margin left to be the same size as the width of the sidebar. Effectively, it's pushing us over from the left-hand side. Now I could have said fixed and said left equals 0 as well, but I want this to take as much of the page as possible. So all this will do is push all the content in from the left 250 pixels. Again, it's not a coincidence it's the same value as the width of that sidebar. We're really marrying the two so they end up next to each other. So we have our sidebar and we have our elements, but you'll notice that there's some space in between them, and I'd like it to be a little cleaner than this is. And so to do that, I'm going to make sure that all of the other margins are 0. Because we specified one of the values here, let's go ahead and use margin to clean this up. So we want 0 for the top, 0 for the right, 0 for the bottom, and then 250 for the left. But we still have all these spaces. We specified all the elements on our page to not have space. Why do we still have space here? The reason for this is that we have to actually tell the body that we want it and all of its other elements by default to have a margin of 0. So I'm going to remove all the individual margins that are sticking on the other elements on the page. And so we finally get that more clean app-like experience we want. The only other layout issue we have is that our footer is still floating way up here because we don't have a ton of content. The trick there is to go find the footer, and let's change its position to fixed and set the bottom to 0. Because left, top, and right don't have properties set for it, it's going to take this bottom and make sure that it adheres to that. We're going to set the footer to start at the edge of the bottom of the page. But once we change it to fixed, we'll see that it doesn't want to take the entire width, so we also have to add width 100%. And so now we've got a fairly good starting point for what our app's going to look like. We're going to make a lot of changes, don't worry. But for now, we can really see by using the HTML to create the structure of the different parts of a page, and then CSS to design how they're going to look on the page with the box model and the position and using naming and using selectors, that we're starting to get a sense of how we're going to structure our web app by using these very simple structures of HTML and CSS to work together.